Ulmer's daughter, Captain Markova.
Yes, I agree. I have to get back to my time, to 1916. Oh, we have a very good chance, Major, if we can reverse the phenomenon that brought you here. What phenomenon did bring me here?
It is what we know as a relativity paradox. It's another dimension. A fifth dimension.
Fifth dimension. Professor Borman's principle of gravitational proportion brought it about. By 1970, it became the standard system used to travel to the planets at the speed of light. Speed of light? About 10,000 miles an hour was fast.
Yes, but there is a pitfall in the system. At speeds approaching that of light, it is possible to break the time lock. The barrier that holds all things in a normal time relationship to each other. That's what happens to all of us. We have slipped out of one time sphere and into another.
Captain Markova broke through in 1973 during her third flight. She was transporting supply from Central Europe to the Venus planet. The captain's men destroyed her ship.
It happened to cruise and I years later. We had returned to Earth for an observation flight in 1994. Our ship crashed.
1994? But the speed I approached in the X-80 was nowhere near the speed of light.
That may be. But it was just enough to create certain mathematical conditions. Let me show you. Here, these symbols represent the Earth, the Sun, your ship. Now, consider these known facts. The Earth is rotating at 1,000 miles per hour, but it is also revolving in orbit around the Sun at 66,000 miles per hour. Time, as we know it, is relative to these movements. But the entire solar system, together with other systems of our galaxy, are moving through space at over 6 million miles per hour.
Theoretically, we're the velocity approaching the speed of light before you ever left the ground.
Yes, but everything is moving at that speed together. It's one unit. The air, the Earth, according to the law of gravity. Time is not affected by the laws of gravity. This is what happened to you. At some point during your high-speed flight, you approached escape velocity, 25,000 miles per hour. It was at this time that you altered your flight angle.
If you hadn't, probably you would have gone on into orbit.
It was this angle, at a specific altitude and velocity, that broke the time barrier. For a fraction of a second, you were suspended in space, no longer interlocked with the time spheres of the Sun and the Earth. Now, during this split second, our galaxy moved onward in time for what amounted to 65 years. An instant later, you had rejoined our solar system. And the rest you know.
Yes.
Then if I repeat the altitude, angle of flight, and speed in directly the opposite direction, I should go back in the time 65 years.
Precisely. Dr. Borman is working on the formula. The three factors must be exact.
And we must locate an escape from the Citadel so I can find my ship.
Right. We must obtain an early map of the Citadel with the tunnel work. Your airbase surely must be included.
They began construction as early as 1972.
The maps are on file in the Supreme's chamber. There is only one way to get them, Major.
You mean Terene?
That's the only way.
No, I won't turn her against her own people. You have to do it.
It's up to you, Major. You haven't much time to decide.
Let me get a reference, not having much time. One by one, each of these scientists betrays the others, revealing the manic madness lurking behind their scientific knowledge. In the end, each is out for him or herself, desirous of harnessing the power of science to go back in time and to leave the others behind. Allison functions merely as a pawn in their power struggle because he himself has the knowledge of modern flight and is the only one who knows how to operate the aircraft that will bring him back to 1960. Now, whether he understood the formula is a whole other matter, but at least he knows how to operate the aircraft. When he does return home alone, he is debriefed by the government, and there's a stock shot of the Pentagon, so you have this arrival of people from the Pentagon who wish to debrief him on his time travel. He's debriefed by the government and begs them to end their own sanctioned mad science, nuclear proliferation. after he explains his experiences, the head of the questioning team in the movie's final line, I think this is what mirrors, I think, that very dramatic final line of Amazing Transparent Man. In the film's final line says, and again looks straight into the camera, his face is completely deformed at this point because he has aged some 44 years through his time travel. Looks into the camera and says, we have a lot of thinking to do. This, like the final line of Amazing Transparent Man, no doubt reflects Ulmer's deepest skepticism about the path modern science was taking. As his daughter, Ariane, who co-starred in this picture under the name of Ariane Art, Ulmer, of course, as she has remarked, and I quote, the pessimism of these films, and she's referring, she was there for both the productions, these two sci-fi clips. The pessimism of these films was the result of the fear of nuclear catastrophe, which we all felt at the time. Ulmer's fears, she often refers to her father as Ulmer, but Ulmer's fear was even greater than ours, as he had to experience things during the First World War which he did not wish to witness again. He was sure that World War III stood before us. End quote. Stylistically, Beyond the Time Barrier does bear a certain resemblance in terms of use of oblique angles, skewed set design, and the like, to its Weimar antecedents. Some critics have tended perhaps to overstate a bit the imprint on the picture. For example, J. Bonanzinger has claimed in reference to Beyond the Time Barrier, and I quote, it is proof positive that you can take the boy out of Germany, but you can't take the expressionist out of the boy. End quote. As I mentioned earlier, Ulmer did not get his start, at least not a credited start, by cutting his teeth on the sets of the classics of German expressionist cinema. He may have felt some degree of influence when he began his own career in the late 1920s, and it should come as no surprise that the emigre director should wish to be associated with this internationally celebrated phase of filmmaking. Still, we should be careful not to place him squarely in the center of the pioneers of that era. Like the mad scientist himself, Ulmer stood much more on the margins, learning the tools of the trade by watching others, and then later scheming up his own big plans for the future. Many of those plans that were foiled, I should add. It is, however, my general contention that Ulmer returned frequently and notably to Weimar-era ideas, figures, and debates in many of the films he shot up until the 1960s, whether in his horror and sci-fi flicks, or in other feature-length work that he did. Even his Z-budget nudie, Naked Venus, from 1959, I'm not going to show you a clip, but it's available on DVD. It's a big seller on Amazon. Anyway, even in his Z-budget nudie, Naked Venus, he revisits the debate on freie Körperkultur, free body culture, as a means of discussing the quasi-scientific value of nudism versus the rigid social mores of puritanical America of the 1950s. The question then is not so much whether mad science was a particularly German subject, but rather why it tends to be associated or linked up with the German aesthetic lineage, either real or imagined, one that seems to have colored not only the career of Edgar G. Ulmer, but much of the American film production from the 1930s onward. That is the question with which I shall end my talk, and that is one that I pose to myself, to the other speakers, of course, from the panel, and to the audience as well. It is the answers, then, and perhaps not as obsessive as an overreaching mad scientist, but maybe something akin to that, that we must now seek. Thank you very much. 1 minute before. I'm happy to field questions, either standing up or seated over food, however you wish to.
You decided 20 minutes late, I think, Grant confused all this before
the keynote will begin promptly at 2, is that correct?
Yes.
So, I will not, I'm happy to speak until late tonight about Ulmer's work on these sci-fi films, on Ulmer in general, on freie Körperkultur. But yeah.
I suggest that at 3:30, instead of beginning my talk, you have your 15 minutes then.
Sure, I thought you were going to suggest
rearrange the rest of the afternoon.
yeah,
that would give you some time at least.
So, if I'm not mistaken, the floor has granted me 15 minutes of discussion during the, that's a great idea. If that's fine with you, I'm happy to do that. That would at least be a bit more organized, I guess.
It looks like we will start 3:30.
I thought that my talk might also have some sort of resonance with yours, and perhaps there are other resonance that may have struck with the other two papers. At any rate, thank you very much for your patience, and that would be great. Peter?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great if we could do that. Thank you very much.
Sure.
That's it. I hope the guinea pig didn't ruin your appetite. I'm a bit concerned about it. Right, exactly. Nothing like, enduring guinea pig. Yeah, this stuff is actually so bizarre. I mean, this explains some of my rough way that I'm going about my cognitive. It's not overly interesting.
This quest for understanding the inner workings of the world aims at the very essence of being and the universe. However, Faust is utterly frustrated in his search for the hoped-for answers in whatever disciplines he chooses, and he engages in the wager with the devil. While not enlarging his scientific knowledge, he experiences a sense of renewed life and enjoys powers over others. Ultimately, Faust fails, and when he faces his human limits, he is redeemed in the end in Goethean fashion by an act of superhuman grace. Faust's quest resembles, above all, a philosophical inquiry. The scenes in his study present him as a probing scholar who finds little solace in books. When he sets out to translate the Bible, he labors to give new meaning to the scriptures, emphasizing etat. This wish to leave behind bookish endeavors and become a man of action marks Faust's desire for radical change. It indicates his need to be in command of that which he reflects, precisely his fear of not being in control over his own destiny. In the cabinet of Dr. Caligari, there is an overall, I would say, metaphorical intertextuality related to Goethe's Faust. And in this film, reading and studying are activities almost all of the characters are engaged in. In most cases, these are intense pursuits defining the figures in their professions. Alan, a student, Francis, probably a docent, Caligari, a doctor and researcher. Only Jane is reading for leisure, and her pastime indicates a figure best described as a dutiful daughter to her father. I did bring, this sort of undergraduate course help to the students some stills from the film. If you look at illustrations 1 through 3, you will remember these figures of reading, Alan and the others, Francis and of course Jane. By the way, interesting is the genderedness of space. Jane is in a very sort of feminine space with rounded forms. I would call it the oyster shell, and she's really the metaphorical pearl in the oyster shell, whereas the men are shown in these very different spaces. She's a dutiful doctor to her father, Dr. Olfen. Faustian motifs appear in various forms. Alan, introduced as a student, frustrated by his bookish endeavors, reacts similar to Faust's irritation and finally escapes the confines of his study to visit the town fair. Lured by the promise of adventure and entertainment, Alan leans on Francis to follow him to the fairground where he seeks diversion. The film cleverly reflects on the origins of cinema in the spectacle of attractions that was the central element of early film. Francis is more reluctant to give himself to diversions. He is the more staid character who later becomes a serious reader and student of sobering facts. He turns sleuth and sets out to detect the murderer that has created havoc in the community. Francis is the one who finds out the truth about the uncanny showman Caligari, whose medium, the somnambulist Cesare, had prophesied Alan's death. Cesare is a paradigmatic example of the hypnotized criminal as Stefan Andriopoulos. I hope I did not scandalize Stefan's name. Stefan? Andreopoulos, with his wonderful book, Besessene Körper, Hypnose, Körperschaften und die Erfindung des Kinos, 2000. He has shown, Andreopoulos, medical and cinema discourses of the time, how they intersect in this particular film. And the Faustian motif of the quest for ultimate knowledge is present when Alan, in his desire to find out about his life, asks how long he has to live. Cesaro's obvious answer is that he will be dead by dawn. Alan's response is a frenzy and historical laughter, which gives him that freakish experience of a doomed, defenseless victim. He is knifed to death in his bed at night, and this is a wonderful scene that you also see in illustration 6. Yes, it is a scene acted out in ingenious cinematic shadow play. Cesaro's prophecy has been fulfilled, albeit in a macabre way. This second murder in the film, the town clerk had been killed prior to Alan's stabbing, adds